Your Honor, the state objects. A child cannot stand as counsel in his father's felony hearing. Then explain to me, Mr. Whitaker, why there is a young man at my defense table. My name is Kieran Vance, Your Honor. I am here because the defendant is my father, and every lawyer in this state had given up on him. Young man, do you understand this is a court of law? Yes, sir. I've read the Georgia Code. And you believe you can do what trained attorneys could not? No, sir. I believe I can ask what they never asked. One question. That's all I need. Your Honor, such time is valuable. So is an innocent man's freedom, sir. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love while everyone doubted you? To understand how this boy reached that moment, we return to the Vance family in their narrow blue house on Carver Street on the south side of Oak Ridge, Georgia. The paint peeled above the porch. The screen door sang on rusty hinges. Yet every evening the smell of Lena Vance's cornbread drifted through that door, and laughter usually followed it. Donovan Vance fixed engines for a living. He had spent many steady years at the local auto shop and never missed a shift. His hands were cracked and stained with oil that never fully washed out. The whole neighborhood knew those hands. When Miss Eddie's old sedan died in the church parking lot, Donovan brought it back to life for free. When the Hendersons could not afford a new alternator, he found a used one and charged nothing for the labor. People can't help being broke, he liked to say, but a man can always help. His son Kieran was small for his age, quiet in a way that made adults forget he was in the room. But that boy forgot nothing. He read cereal boxes at breakfast. He read repair manuals in his father's garage. He read the dictionary page by page, the way other kids watched cartoons. One night, Lena quizzed him from the refrigerator warranty booklet just for fun. Kieran recited paragraph after paragraph from memory, word for word. Every week, father and son kept a ritual. 2 folding chairs in the garage, 2 glasses of sweet tea. Donovan would start a sick engine and ask, "What's wrong with her?" Kieran would close his eyes and listen until he found the answer hiding inside the noise. Everything broken leaves a clue, Donovan always said. You just have to be patient enough to find it. Remember those words. They would matter more than anyone in Oak Ridge could have guessed. One evening, a man in a gray hoodie walked into Maddox Liquors on Route 9. He showed a pistol, emptied the register, and vanished into the dark. No one was hurt. The security camera caught a brief stretch of grainy footage, a tall black man, broad shoulders, work boots. 3 nights later, headlights flooded the Vance living room. Kieran was at the kitchen table doing homework when the door shook under heavy knocking. 4 officers stood on the porch. Flashlights swept the hallway. Lena's voice cracked as she asked what this was about. Donovan came out in his undershirt with his hands already raised, calm even then. "There's a mistake," he kept saying. "I was at work that night. Call my shop, please. There's a mistake." They cuffed him under the porch light where the whole street could see. Mrs. Pearson watched from her window. The Henderson boys watched from their bikes, and Kieran watched from the doorway, pencil still in his hand as 4 strangers folded his father into the back of a patrol car. Donovan turned once before the door closed. He found his son's eyes. He mouthed 4 words through the glass. "I will come home." The charge landed the next morning. Armed robbery. The evidence was thin, but it was loud. That brief, blurry video, a timestamp, and a witness who told detectives he was fairly sure about what he saw. Bail was set at an amount far beyond the family's reach. Lena took a second job cleaning offices at night. She came home smelling of bleach long after Kieran's bedtime and checked on him anyway. Most nights he was still awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of a truck that never pulled into the driveway. At school, teachers began speaking to Kieran in softer voices. At church, conversations dropped to whispers when Lena walked past. The town had already decided which story it wanted to believe. But in a small bedroom on Carver Street, a young boy kept replaying one simple fact. His father was at work that night. Somebody somewhere had made a mistake, and every mistake, like every broken engine, leaves a clue. The trial unfolded over several days. It took the town of Oak Ridge less time than that to make up its mind. Donovan's court-appointed lawyer was a man named Gary Pittman. He carried a battered briefcase and the tired eyes of a man juggling far too many cases at once. He met Donovan for the first time shortly before jury selection. "Plead it out," Pittman said through the visitation glass. "They'll offer a reduced sentence." "I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do," Donovan answered. "I was at work. Pull my time card." Pittman wrote something in his folder. He never pulled the card. The courtroom on the first day smelled of old varnish and cold air conditioning. Lena sat in the second row wearing her church dress. Kieran sat beside her, his feet not quite reaching the floor. He had brought a notebook. Nobody thought anything of it. He wrote down everything. Prosecutor Harlan Whitaker owned that room the way some men own a stage. Silver cufflinks, a voice built for closing arguments. "Ladies and gentlemen," he told the jury, "the evidence will be brief, because the truth is simple." Then came the footage. A tall man in a gray hoodie, broad shoulders, work boots. The same build as Donovan Vance. The same walk, Whitaker said, playing the video again in slow motion. And in the corner, glowing white, the timestamp. Donovan's shift at the auto shop started later that night. He had told detectives he left home around the usual time, stopped for gas, and drove across town, which meant on paper, he had no alibi for the exact window. Whitaker leaned on that window until it cracked. He had the time, Whitaker told the jury. He had the build, and the man on that screen walks into that store like a man who knows exactly what he came for. Roy Maddox took the stand. The store owner kept twisting a paper cup in his hands. He testified that the robber was tall and moved like a working man. When Whitaker asked if that man was sitting in the courtroom, Maddox hesitated. He looked at Donovan for a long moment. "I believe so," he said quietly. "I believe that's him. I believe." 2 words doing the work that proof was supposed to do. Pittman's cross-examination was brief. He asked nothing about the camera, nothing about the lighting, nothing about the timestamp glowing in the corner of the screen. In the second row, a small hand wrote 5 words in a notebook. Nobody asked about the clock. The jury came back with a verdict of guilty. Lena made a sound Kieran had never heard before. Not quite a scream, something deeper, like a wall giving way inside a house. Donovan stood very still. He had pressed his own shirt that morning in the county jail, working the collar flat because he believed the truth would be enough. Judge Harlan Thorpe handed down the sentence. The gavel came down once, clean and final, like a door closing somewhere far away. On the courthouse steps that afternoon, Whitaker buttoned his jacket and spoke into a row of microphones. "Today, Oak Ridge is safer," he said. "Justice does not check your address before it finds you." Cameras flashed. Somewhere behind the crowd, a woman in a church dress guided her son through a side door away from the lenses. Kieran did not cry in the courtroom. He cried that night into his pillow with the lights off so his mother would not hear. Then he stopped. He did not cry again. What followed was the slow arithmetic of losing everything. Lena's paycheck from the diner could not carry a mortgage alone. The bank took the blue house on Carver Street. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat where the radiator clanked all night, and the window faced a brick wall. Lena gave Kieran the bedroom. She slept on the couch and never once called it a sacrifice. At his new school, Kieran ate lunch alone. Word travels fast in a town like Oak Ridge. Kids whispered. Some parents whispered louder. Teachers were kind in the careful way people are kind to something fragile. Kieran kept his head down and his grades up. The notebook from the trial stayed under his mattress. Some nights he read his own pages like scripture, looking for the sentence everyone else had skipped. The first appeal was filed by Pittman, who misspelled Donovan's middle name on the cover page. It was denied. No new evidence, the ruling said. No grounds for reversal. The system had graded its own homework and given itself a passing mark. Visits to the state prison happened on a regular schedule. The long bus rides. Empty your pockets. Walk through the metal detector. Wait in the gray room with the bolted tables. Each visit, the glass and the gray walls taught the same lesson. The state held its sentence. The Vance family had nothing but those visits. Donovan got thinner with each passing month. The uniform began to hang off his shoulders. One visit, he came to the table with a bruise riding high on his cheekbone. He said he slipped in the kitchen. He smiled when he said it. The smile was the part Kieran could not stand. "I'm okay, son," Donovan said. "Tell me about school." Kieran looked at the bruise, then at his father's eyes. "Dad, what time did you clock in the night it happened?" Donovan blinked. "Right at the start of the shift." "Why?" "The robbery happened earlier. The store is on Route 9. Your shop is on the other side of town. I measured it on the library map." Lena touched her son's arm. Donovan looked at the boy for a long, quiet moment, and something moved behind his eyes. Hope is a dangerous thing in a place like that. He pushed it down. "Don't you carry this. he whispered when the guards called time, holding his boy as long as the rules allowed. You hear me? This is not yours to fix. But on the long ride home, Kieran pressed his forehead against the cold bus window and watched the pines blur past. He would be a grown man by the time his father came home. His mother would have spent her best years on a couch above a laundromat. The folding chairs in the garage were already gone. Somebody had made a mistake. His father had said it himself in another life over sweet tea and engine noise. Everything broken leaves a clue. You just have to be patient enough to find it. The question came over a simple meal. Mom, what is the law exactly? Lena looked up from her plate. What do you mean, baby? The thing that took Dad. Is it a person? Is it a book? Because if it's a book, I can read it. Lena opened her mouth and found she had no answer. Her son was asking the way engineers ask. He wanted the schematics. The next afternoon, Kieran walked into the Oak Ridge Public Library and asked where they kept the books about the law. Mrs. Zoltan, who had run the front desk for many years, pointed him toward the paperback novels about lawyers. No, ma'am, Kieran said politely. The real ones. She studied him over her glasses. Then she walked him past the fiction, past the encyclopedias to a dim corner where the Georgia Code sat in heavy green volumes nobody had touched in years. He came back the next day, and the day after that, and every day the doors were open. The words fought him at first. Habeas corpus, evidentiary jurisdiction, post-conviction relief. He kept a list of every word he did not know and attacked the dictionary at night, the same way he had once attacked the refrigerator warranty. He filled one notebook, then a second, then a third. Mrs. Lawton began saving the corner table for him. When another librarian objected that legal volumes could not go out on a child's card, Mrs. Lawton issued him an adult card on the spot and dared the world to say one word about it. He learned that a guilty verdict was not always the end of a road. He learned the phrase that would become his anchor. Extraordinary motion for new trial based on newly discovered evidence. He learned that before you can fight a case, you have to hold it in your hands. So he wrote a letter to the clerk of court requesting copies of his father's file under the Open Records Act. He rewrote that letter until it sounded like an adult. The copying fees came due. He earned every cent raking leaves and hauling bottles to the recycling center. The envelope arrived thick as a phone book. Police reports, witness statements, the full trial transcript. He read it the way his father listened to engines, slowly, patiently, over and over, waiting for the wrong note. He read Whitaker's closing argument so many times he could recite it. He drew maps of Route 9. He taped timelines to his bedroom wall on butcher paper. Some nights Lena found him asleep at his desk, cheek resting on a page of testimony, and carried him to bed without waking him. On the next prison visit, Kieran said nothing about any of it. He had decided his father would not hear a word until there was something real to hold. Lena worried at first. She asked his teacher if it was healthy, a boy spending every free hour with law books. The teacher said most kids hide from grief in games or silence. Her son had simply chosen a heavier shield. Lena let him be. She started packing him a sandwich for the corner table. Vivian Hale had been watching him for months before she ever said a word. She was retired after 4 decades of practicing law, and she came to the library every morning for the crossword and the quiet. But the quiet kept being interrupted by the same small boy hauling the Georgia Code to his corner table like a man carrying firewood. One afternoon, curiosity won. She sat down across from him. That's an odd choice of reading, young man. It's not reading, ma'am. It's studying. And what are we studying? How to reopen a case. Vivian smiled the way adults smile at children playing office. Whose case? My father's. The smile faded. Something in the boy's voice did not belong to a child. She decided to test him gently. All right, tell me the standard for newly discovered evidence in this state. Kieran closed his book and counted on his fingers. He went through every requirement one by one in plain words. Vivian put down her pencil. The crossword sat unfinished. She asked harder questions. He answered most of them. Where he failed like a first-year law student, not like a young boy. When she asked who had taught him, he shrugged. The green books, ma'am, and the dictionary. She looked at him for a long moment. Decades in courtrooms had taught her what talent looked like. It had also taught her how often talent gets buried by zip codes and circumstance. Bring me the file, she said at last. I will look at it once. Once, you understand me. I am retired. Yes, ma'am. He brought everything the next morning. the transcript, the maps, the timelines, 3 notebooks written in careful pencil. Vivian opened the folder, intending to skim. She read until the library closed around her. That night she sat at her kitchen table, tea going cold beside the transcript. Brief cross-examination. Not one question about the camera. A man serving a long sentence on blurry video, and 2 words from a nervous witness. I believe. She called Lena Vance the next day. Mrs. Vance, my name is Vivian Hale. I am an attorney and I would like to help your family. No, there is no fee. Please don't insult me by asking twice. But that Sunday at her kitchen table, Vivian laid out the hard truth for both of them. The law has a cruel rule, she said. It does not care that the defense was lazy. It does not care that the case was thin. To reopen this, we need something new. Something the jury never saw. Without that, we have nothing. Something new. Kieran went home, sat on his bed, and stared at the printed still from the security footage, until his eyes burned. It had been there all along, in plain sight, in the corner of the frame, waiting for someone patient enough to find it. The discovery came one night. Lena was asleep on the couch. Kieran sat at his desk with the printed still from the security footage, the page he had studied more than any other page on Earth. A yard sale magnifying glass moved slowly across the frame, the robber's shoulder, the register, the shelf of bottles, the back wall above the cooler door. There was a clock on that wall, round, white-faced, slightly blurred. He had seen it many times, and never once thought about it. Because why would anyone study a clock when the timestamp already tells you the time? He leaned closer. The hour hand sat just past 9. The minute hand pointed at the 2. The timestamp in the corner of the very same frame read an earlier hour. 1 frame, 2 clocks, an hour apart. Kieran stopped breathing for a moment. Then he moved fast, pulling his notebook from the shelf, flipping to a page he had copied earlier and never needed. Daylight saving time had begun shortly before the robbery. Every clock in Georgia jumped forward 1 hour. Every clock that someone remembered to change. Roy Maddox had changed his register. He had changed the wall clock above the cooler, but the store's old camera system never got touched. It was still running on the previous setting, stamping every frame 1 hour behind the world, which meant the man in the gray hoodie did not walk into the store at the time-stamped hour. He walked in later, and at the start of the shift that same night, Donovan Vance swiped his card at the gate of the auto shop, miles across town. The machine printed it in ink. Minutes before the robbery, he was inside a fenced lot under floodlights, surrounded by co-workers. That time card had been sitting in the case file, useless under the old timeline, unbeatable under the true one. Kieran checked the math again. Then he walked into the living room on unsteady legs and shook his mother's shoulder. "Mom, wake up. I found it." Vivian made him prove it the next morning. She attacked the theory from every side the way Whitaker would. Maybe the wall clock was broken. Maybe it was wrong. Kieran slid his answers across her kitchen table one by one. The camera model, an old system with no automatic time update. The sunset tables, the time card, 2 independent clocks against 1 forgotten machine. Vivian sat back and took off her glasses, her hands steady through decades of verdicts. We're not entirely steady now, and the best catch I have ever seen comes from a boy with a yard sale magnifying glass. She drafted the extraordinary motion for a new trial that week. Newly discovered evidence. A timestamp error invisible to everyone who had ever looked at the case, because everyone had looked at the wrong clock. Kieran read every page before she filed it. He found 2 typos. She let him fix them himself. Then came the silence. Every afternoon, Kieran checked the mailbox before he checked anything else in his life. The envelope from the Superior Court arrived. Lena could not bear to open it, so Kieran did. Motion granted. Evidentiary hearing scheduled. The Honorable Harlan Thorpe presiding. A hearing is a door cracked open, Vivian warned him. Nothing more. And Harlan Whitaker will spend every minute trying to slam it shut. Word had traveled. The courtroom held more people than the trial ever had. Reporters filled the back row. Men from the auto shop sat shoulder to shoulder in clean shirts. Mrs. Elton closed the library desk for the day. Half of Carver Street came in their church clothes. Donovan entered through the side door in a suit Vivian had sent to the prison. It hung loose on him now. He kept touching the collar the way a man touches something he no longer trusts to be real. His eyes found Lena. Then they found his son seated at the defense table with a stack of folders, and Donovan Vance had to look at the ceiling for a while. Whitaker had arrived early, flanked by 2 assistants and a cart of file boxes. He looked exactly as he had years earlier, only more polished. The district attorney election was approaching. He paused at the defense table on his way past and lowered his voice for Vivian alone. "Retirement was kinder to you than this morning will be, counselor." "Then it should be a short morning," Vivian said without looking up. Judge Harlan Thorpe took the bench. He had a reputation in that courthouse. Fair, impatient, allergic to theater. Vivian rose. "Vivian Hale for the defense, Your Honor. I am counsel of record, but with the court's permission, the new evidence will be presented by my associate." He found it. She placed her hand on Kieran's shoulder. "Your Honor, the state objects. A child cannot stand as counsel in a felony hearing." "Then explain it to me, Mr. Whitaker. Why is there a young man at my defense table? My name is Kieran Vance, Your Honor. The defendant is my father, and I'm here because every lawyer in this state gave up on him." The room stirred. Judge Thorpe removed his glasses and looked at the boy for a long moment. "Miss Hale, is this a performance?" "No, Your Honor. It is the opposite of one. The court has discretion over who may address it in an evidentiary hearing. Mr. Vance will speak under my direct supervision. No one alive knows this evidence better. I would only be reading his notes aloud. Your Honor, the state's time is valuable. So is an innocent man's freedom, sir." The words were out of Kieran's mouth before he could weigh them. Somewhere behind him, a pew creaked. Whitaker's jaw tightened. Judge Thorpe tapped his pen twice against the bench, and something that was almost a smile passed behind his eyes and was gone. "I will allow it," Thorpe said. "Under supervision within limits, young man. This courtroom runs on rules. Break one, and you sit down. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." The clerk brought a wooden step so the lectern would not swallow him. Kieran climbed it, opened his folder, and began. His voice cracked on the very first sentence. A reporter in the back row chuckled, and the sound landed on the boy like cold water. Kieran stopped. He found his father's eyes across the room. Donovan nodded once, slow and steady, the same nod he used to give over a stubborn engine. "Take your time. Listen for the wrong note." Kieran started again, and this time his voice held. "Your Honor, the defense submits Exhibit A, a still frame from the state's own security footage, the same brief seconds that convicted my father. We are not asking the court to look at anything new. We are asking the court to look at the corner everyone skipped." He walked them through it plain and unhurried. The timestamp, the round wall clock above the cooler door, hands frozen at a later hour, daylight saving time, the camera system, an old model with no automatic update, confirmed by the manufacturer's own manual, submitted as Exhibit B. "2 clocks in one frame, Your Honor. They cannot both be right." Whitaker was on his feet before the echo faded. "Objection. Pure speculation. Counsel is asking this court to overturn a jury verdict based on a smudge. That clock is a blur in a blurry video. It could read anything. Was the wall clock even accurate? Was it running at all? There is no foundation." He turned, buttoned his jacket, and addressed the bench with the calm of a man who had won this room many times. "The defense has built a castle on a photograph, Your Honor. The state convicted Donovan Vance on evidence. A child's homework project does not outweigh a jury." "Mr. Whitaker raises a fair point," Thorpe said. "The clock alone is a question, not an answer. Who can speak to that camera system? Who maintained it? Who set its time?" "The owner, Your Honor," Kieran said. "Mr. Roy Maddox. He is on our witness list." Thorpe checked the list, then the clock on his own wall, and made his decision. "We will hear from Mr. Maddox after the recess. 30 minutes. The gavel came down. The room exhaled all at once. Vivian leaned toward Kieran and spoke under the noise. "The door is open. Now comes the part where they try to slam it." In the hallway outside the courtroom, the space filled with low voices and squeaking shoes, Lena found a bench by the window and held her son's hand the way she had held it at the funeral of her own mother, tight enough to anchor them both. Kieran did not talk. He watched everything. He watched the deputies lead his father toward the holding room, wrists chained to a belly belt, paper slippers under the borrowed suit. Donovan slowed as he passed. The deputies allowed it. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Father and son looked at each other through the moving crowd. Donovan tipped his chin up. "Stand tall." Kieran tipped his chin up back. The deputies moved on, and the chain made a small, terrible music down the corridor. He watched Roy Maddox, too. The store owner sat alone at the far end of the hall, turning a foam coffee cup in his hands, the same way he had turned that paper cup on the witness stand years earlier. He had aged badly. He kept his eyes on the floor tiles. Twice he stood up as if to leave, and twice he sat back down. And then Kieran watched something that made his stomach drop. One of Whitaker's assistants walked the length of the hall and settled into the seat beside Maddox. The conversation was brief. The assistant did all the talking. Maddox kept shaking his head, smaller and smaller each time, like a man being talked out of something he never said out loud. When the assistant left, Maddox looked gray. Kieran tugged Vivian's sleeve and told her what he had seen. Vivian's face did not change. That frightened him more than anything. She guided him into the small attorney's room off the hallway and shut the door against the noise. "Listen to me now," she said. "Everything we have runs through that scared man with the coffee cup. The clock means nothing, unless Maddox says under oath that he never changed the camera's time. If he gets up there and swears he reset it or says he can't remember, the photograph becomes a smudge again. The motion dies, and the law will never let us open this door twice." He told the police the system was old, Kieran said. "It's in the report." He said a lot of things. "Fear edits memory, son. And that man has had years and one hallway conversation to get afraid." She crouched, joints cracking, until her eyes were level with his. "The judge is letting you ask the questions. That was your evidence and your right, and I made it part of the deal. But understand what that means. Whitaker will object to everything. Thorpe's patience is thin. You will get one clean question before they box you in. Maybe one. Then I only need one." "Which one?" "You wrote out 9. Kieran reached into his folder and took out a single sheet of paper. 8 of the 9 questions had pencil lines through them. He had crossed out the last one earlier and written a new one beneath it in small, careful letters. He turned the sheet around and let her read it. Vivian read it twice. Then she sat back slowly. "You're not going to ask him about the camera at all." "No, ma'am." "If I ask about the camera," he gets to say, "I don't remember." People remember other things better. For a long moment, the old lawyer just looked at him. This boy in a tie, cut down from his fathers who had taught himself the law, out of green library books because the grown world had shrugged and moved on. Decades of juries told her the question was either brilliant or fatal. She could not tell which. That had only ever happened to her a few times. A knock. The bailiff's voice through the door. "Court's back in 5. Lena was waiting in the hall. She knelt and straightened Kieran's tie, and for one moment he was not a legal associate. He was her little boy, and her hands trembled on the knot. "Whatever happens in there," she whispered, "your father already got back the thing he lost. Somebody fought for him." The doors opened. Roy Maddox rose from his bench like a man walking to his own sentencing. And in his pocket, folded small, Kieran Vance carried one question. Roy Maddox swore the oath with a dry mouth and sat down like the chair might break. Judge Thorpe looked at the defense table. "Young man, the court will allow you to examine the witness within limits. Make them count." Kieran climbed the wooden step. He did not open his folder. He left the single sheet of paper folded in his pocket, because he knew it by heart, and he looked at the nervous man in the witness chair, the way his father had taught him to listen to engines. Patiently, kindly even. "Mr. Maddox, what time does your store close?" Whitaker rose halfway. "Objection. Relevance. The defense's entire theory is about a camera, and counsel is asking about business hours." "It goes directly to the timeline, Your Honor," Kieran said. "I'll allow it. Answer the question, sir." Maddox blinked. Of all the questions he had braced for, this was not one, and that was the point. There was nothing to fear in it, nothing to forget. 9, he said. "Every night for many years. My daddy closed at 9 and so do I." "Thank you, sir." Kieran lifted one page from the table. "This is your statement to the officer the night of the robbery. State's evidence, page 11. You said, and I'm reading your words, 'The man came in while I was counting out my register to close.' Is that true?" "It's true. I was counting the drawer. I counted at closing. Always have. You were closing up. I was closing up." Kieran set the page down. The courtroom had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. "Mr. Maddox, if your store closes at 9, what were you doing counting your closing drawer at the earlier timestamp?" Nobody moved. Somewhere in the gallery, a chair creaked and stopped. ashamed of itself. Maddox opened his mouth and closed it again. His eyes went to the prosecution table and found no help there because there was no help to give. Then his face changed. The fear drained out of it, and underneath the fear was something that had been buried for years. Plain confusion, plain truth. "It wasn't the early hour," he said slowly. "It couldn't have been. I was closing. I remember the drawer in my hands. I remember looking at my clock when he walked in because I thought 10 more minutes and I'd have been gone." He stared at nothing, doing the arithmetic of his own memory. "It was after 9. It was always after 9. I told them that. I thought the video proved me wrong. I thought I remembered it wrong." Judge Thorpe leaned forward. "Mr. Maddox, the court has one question of its own. The camera system in your store. After the time changed that spring, did you ever reset its clock?" The room held its breath, and the answer fell out of him like something he was glad to finally set down. "That old box, Your Honor, I never touched that thing in my life. It came with the store. The man who installed it is dead. I changed my wall clock and my register and went on with my business. I didn't even know the camera had a clock to change." Vivian was already standing. "Your Honor, Defense Exhibit C, the county dispatch log. Mr. Maddox's emergency call was received shortly after the robbery. If the robbery happened at the corrected time, Exhibit D, Donovan Vance's time card stamped at the gate of the auto shop miles away, and Exhibit E, the sworn affidavit of his shift foreman, confirming he was on the floor with his crew from the start of the shift until much later." She let it land, then finished quietly. "Every clock in this case agrees, Your Honor. The wall clock, the dispatch log, the time card, the witness's own memory. Every clock except one, and that one was never set." At the defense table, Donovan Vance sat with his fists pressed together under his chin, shaking, while years of a stolen life were handed back to him, one exhibit at a time. Whitaker fought. He demanded the dispatch log's chain of custody. Vivian had it. He suggested the foreman was a friend covering for a friend. The foreman was in the gallery sitting next to a row of auto shop men, all of them on the record. He argued a man could leave a fenced lot unseen, drive the distance, rob a store in work boots, and drive back. He heard the sentence as it left his mouth, heard the gallery hear it, and stopped. For the first time in years, Harlan Whitaker stood in a courtroom with nothing to say. "No further questions," he managed, and sat down. Kieran gathered his page and stepped off the wooden step. He looked very small, walking back to the defense table, and the silence he walked through was enormous. Judge Thorpe studied the still frame for a long moment. 2 clocks, 1 frame. "The court will take a brief recess," he said, "and return with its ruling." The recess lasted. Nobody left the courtroom. Nobody risked losing a seat. When Judge Thorpe returned, he sat in silence for a moment, looking at the papers before him as if weighing more than paper. Then he began to read, and his voice carried to the last row. "This court finds that the conviction of Donovan Vance rests on a single piece of evidence, a video timestamp now shown to be an error by 1 full hour. The corrected timeline is corroborated by the dispatch log, by the witness's original statement, by his testimony today, and by the defendant's own employment records, which placed him miles from the scene minutes before the crime. The verdict cannot stand. The conviction is vacated. The state is directed to show cause within days. Why this matter should not be dismissed entirely." He looked up. "Mr. Vance, this court orders your immediate release, and this court offers you something it owes you, which is an apology." The gavel came down, and the room came up. All of it, all at once. A deputy crossed to Donovan Vance and unlocked the cuffs, and the sound they made coming off was small and dry. Nothing like the music they deserved. Donovan stood there rubbing his wrists, a free man in a borrowed suit, looking like he had forgotten how to move without permission. Then his son hit him at a dead run. Donovan went down on one knee and caught him, and the two of them stayed like that in the middle of the courtroom floor, the boy's face buried in his father's collar. The father's hand spread across the back of the boy's head, the way he used to hold him as a baby. Lena reached them a second later, and the three of them folded into one shape. The gallery stood. The auto shop men stood first, then the church pews, then everyone. And the sound was not cheering exactly. It was lower than that, and better. "You found the clue," Donovan kept saying into his son's hair. "You found it. You found it. You told me where to look," Kieran said. When the room finally quieted, Judge Harlan Thorpe did something the bailiffs had never seen in his courtroom. He came down off the bench. He crossed the floor and stood in front of a boy whose head did not reach his shoulder and offered his hand. "Yesterday morning I asked your attorney whether you were a performance. Thorpe said, I came close to refusing you this room. That would have been the worst mistake of my career, son. This court has been doing its job for many years. Today you reminded it what the job is." Kieran shook his hand. "Thank you for letting me ask my question, sir." "One question," Thorpe said, and shook his head slowly. "I've watched many lawyers. Most of them would have asked 9. Harlan Whitaker packed his boxes alone. His assistants had already started for the door. He paused at the rail on his way out and, to whatever credit remains a man like that, he stopped in front of Donovan Vance. "The state will not contest the dismissal." He said it was the closest thing to an apology he knew how to carry. Then he walked out past the reporters, and not one camera turned to follow him. Within time, the district attorney's office would announce a review of every conviction built on that camera, and Whitaker's name would quietly leave the campaign posters before the election ever came. Roy Maddox waited by the doors. He stood twisting his cap until the family reached him, and then his words came out broken. "I let them tell me my own memory was wrong. Years. Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry." Donovan looked at him for a long moment. He had earned the right to refuse the man's hand. Kieran watched his father, learning one last thing. "You raised your hand today and told the truth," Donovan said, "and took it. That's the man I'll remember." Outside, the day had turned bright and cold. Donovan Vance walked down the courthouse steps with his wife under one arm and his son under the other, and he stopped halfway, lifted his face into the sun, and stood there until his eyes stopped shining. "Take your time," Lena said softly. They had it now. Later, on a corner lot off Route 9, a new sign went up over an old garage. "Vance and Son, Auto Repair." Donovan hung it himself, and when the bolts were tight, he stood back and looked at the second word longer than the first. The state paid Donovan a settlement for the years it took. He used part of it to buy the lot. He fixed Miss Eddie's sedan the first week free of charge because some things in a man do not change no matter what is done to him. Lena sleeps in a bedroom now. The couch is just a couch. Kieran went back to being a kid mostly. He plays ball badly. He still reads too late under the covers. But on a regular schedule, he rides his bike to the public library where an old lawyer holds a corner table and teaches him what the green books cannot. Vivian Hale framed exactly one thing from her decades of practice and hung it in her kitchen, a sheet of paper with 9 questions on it, 8 crossed out in pencil. The law schools will wait for him. They already know his name. The boy who beat a long sentence with a wall clock, a time card, and one question nobody thought to ask. His father said it best back when it was just engine noise and sweet tea. Everything broken leaves a clue. You just have to be patient enough to find it. So, here is my question for you. If you had been sitting in that courtroom when a young boy stood up at the defense table, would you have listened or would you have laughed with the room? Be honest in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it and subscribe, because there are more stories like this one waiting to be told. I told this story because the world nearly buried a man and the only person stubborn enough to keep digging was a child. Talent doesn't check your age, your zip code, or your skin. It just waits to be seen. Somebody out there is waiting too. Look closer.